Hey Calvary, today I am joined by Shauna Pilgreen. She is author of Love Where You Live, one of the books that was a massive inspiration for our neighboring series. And she's joining me today as we get to learn a little bit about her story and the way she's seen neighboring play out in her life in her city of San Francisco. And then we also kind of want to get to some tips and tricks for neighboring and help us out as we kind of navigate and grow in the art of neighboring and loving our neighbors well. So just to kind of kick off, Shauna, I kind of wanted just to turn it over to you. We'd love to hear a little bit about your neighboring story, how you ended up in San Francisco. Where did this passion and heartbeat for neighboring come from? And yeah, we'd just like to know a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, so first of all, hello, Calvary. It's good to be with you. And Chris, yeah, thanks for having me. It's crazy that because of technology, I can literally be just yards away from the Golden Gate Bridge and yet coming to you in Missouri. So yeah, a little bit about my story. Our family moved to San Francisco in 2010, and our whole purpose, a main purpose, was to move here to start a church. However, to start a church, you need people. So it got down to neighboring pretty quick for us. And so in order to live here and grow a church, we needed to make friends, essentially. And the thing I noticed very early on, and I grew up in the rural suburban parts of the country. So this was my first go at urban life. But one thing I quickly noticed is, wait a second, there is not a welcome committee here when we moved in. And I think I kind of sat around waiting for it for a few days, honestly, maybe even a few weeks. And I realized, wait a second, Shauna, they're not all going to come out here and welcome you. What if you try to be the welcome? Which seems a little kind of a flipped view of neighboring. Wait a second, aren't they supposed to welcome us? And here I feel something in my spirit that says, no, I'm supposed to be welcoming them. And I think once we turn that to realize this is the call that God has for every follower, is that we're to go and love our neighbors, not wait for our neighbors to come and love us. And so once that got switched around in my head and in my heart, I began to look at this place in a whole new way. And I'll just be honest with you again, San Francisco is not and has not been an easy place to love. It is a work in progress, and it has taken a lot of prayer, and it still takes a lot of prayer. But as we've prayed, as I pray, God has and is still growing my heart for this place. And I think just like in any relationship we're in, whether it's a marriage or parenting or just even in a friendship, the same is true. We don't have, it's not all love and feelings all the time. It's a commitment. And that is what neighboring in San Francisco has meant for us over these years.
Yeah. So in Missouri, in the Midwest, we have the challenge almost of a Midwest politeness, where we almost don't want to intrude or like bother our neighbor. We'll just go like straight into the garage door down. Like we don't want to cause a ruckus or like, be a disturbance. So that's kind of a unique challenge for us, is to actually get out of that comfortability of just kind of being the polite neighbor. What's a unique challenge on the West Coast in San Francisco that you can share with us?
Well, it's interesting, Chris. I probably the first few years living here would have probably said, oh, we're very different, because we're all living in such, we're 7 miles by 7 miles. So we're all like living on top and below and beside. And so I would say it's very different. But the longer I've lived here, I've realized, no, what is your garage or our earbuds? What might be things that you can close down and put off and shut off one another? We have our same mechanisms here. And while it does kind of come across as like, oh, we don't want to intrude, we don't want to impose, they've kind of got their life going on, we don't want to interfere, I really believe if we got deep down to the bare bones of this, it's we ourselves have too much going on, and we don't want to inconvenience our life. And I think it's easy to say, well, they've got their garage closed, or they're probably not home, and we want to pin it off on someone else. I think when we really look at the heart of neighboring, it comes down to a heart issue for ourselves. And it's really like, my life is too busy. I've got too much on my calendar. I've got my kids to take care of. I've got a busy life, vacation, and work. And I think if we really get to the heart of it, we ourselves are our own barrier to this call to be a good neighbor.
Wow, that's so good. Yeah, thank you for that. That's great. So what are some ways, I want to transition a little bit, what are some ways in which you have seen God work powerfully, like you've seen his fingerprints and footprints in your city, in your family's life, in your church's life, the ways in which you've seen him move specifically through neighboring, whether it's a small talk conversation, whether it's actual neighborhood event, like it could be anything. What are the ways in which you've seen God move in some powerful ways?
Well, I'll just tell you, I am an introvert. After I have a few conversations in the day, I'm kind of done. It takes a lot of work and gumption on my part to get out and have a conversation. But what I have learned, Chris, is that practice makes perfect. The more you practice at it, the more you put yourself out there, the more comfortable you get with it. And also the more comfortable I've gotten even with my mistakes. So taking you back 10 years ago when we moved here, I had figured out how we could get to Chinatown so we could do some exploring and kind of put on the tourist hat. And it ended up being a very expensive trip to Chinatown because we ended up getting our van towed. I've had moments of taking a meal to a friend in church and we got our window broken and our kids' backpacks stolen. I share these stories to say I have made plenty of mistakes and have felt just the brokenness and hurt that comes from living anywhere, actually. But I have learned over the years that if we just put ourselves out there and make an ask, we might actually be surprised with what God's going to do. And I also think if we have this approach with this, okay, God, I'm not sure how this is going to go, but I'm going to make a try at it. I'm going to say hello. I'm going to get to know my neighbor. And I think also just using what you're gifted with. If I tell you just even a little bit about our family, we've got 4 kids, so there's 6 of us, and that's quite a large family in San Francisco. But if we just take what we're good at, we've got one of our boys loves to grill, and so our daughter loves to make creative signs. So it's just taking what we have, and it's like we'll offer that to our neighbors. And so we do cookies and cocoa at the holidays. Costco is a big thing here. And so getting Costco pizza and bottled water and their amazing cookies, we'll just set that up on the sidewalk occasionally and just offer free food to our neighbors. So it's taking what you've got. It's using the season of life you're in and not trying to copy what you see someone else doing, but really and that's what God calls us to do. He doesn't call us to overcomplicate it, but just use what you have, use the resources that you've been given and serve out of that. We've made homemade ice cream and 20 people show up. And then we've hosted an Easter egg hunt for our street and no one shows up. Oh, you just go for it. You go for it and you learn from it. But at the same time, I think there is something incredible that God does with our obedience that we don't even recognize or even see in the moment. But over time, you keep being faithful and you keep showing up. And I promise you, God is doing things behind the scenes. And I'll let you in on just a story that's actually in the making right now. This is an ongoing story to be continued. He was a son with him. And, when you hit middle school and high school, you kind of lose touch. Mm-hmm. Well, just in 2021, his mom was in a car accident at the intersection at our house. And it wasn't the kind of way you want to get reintroduced to one another. She's fine, but it opened up an opportunity for us to be able to bless this family. So through a few gift cards and inviting them to church online, we've reconnected. Well, the young man has found Jesus, and he's found Jesus not from anyone we know, but from someone else here in our city. But he has no foundations. He has no foundations. And so because of this reconnection through this car wreck, they've reached out to us and are asking us all kinds of questions. And they're actually coming for dinner next week.
Oh, that's so cool.
I don't know where this is going. But this is the kind of stuff of you just keep showing up and you just wait on God to do his thing. And I think for us, we think that we've got to make it happen. And God's timetable is so different. And so even just a challenge that we're taking on ourselves and that I even extend to all of you is that longevity really is just a gift to where we live. We give our community so much when they know that they can count on us and that we're here. We're here to stay.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's incredible. So we've talked about food a little bit, and I love food. Like everyone loves food. Do you find like meals or barbecues or just stuff like that is almost like the easiest commonplace where it's just level ground? It seems approachable. People are socially, no matter where they come from, okay, now we've been brought to the table. Do you feel like that's one of the better instruments for neighboring?
Absolutely. We all love food. And we still live in a time where there's so many options, or we don't want to offend. So we're like, I'm not quite sure I can have them over because they might eat something different than we do. So my two suggestions are, one, you always can go to a restaurant that kind of has all different kinds. The way I think our culture works now, just ask, are there any food preferences or food allergies? But there is just something to be said about having people over into our homes and into our own personal space that just opens up a lot more opportunities, and I think invites a level of comfort that I believe that only God can bring in. And yes, absolutely, meet someone for a taco or for a cup of coffee while you're out. That's just easy to do, and I think super convenient. But I also say, let's also try to be the kind of people that say, we're going to open up our homes. Our homes are blessings to begin with, so let's use those places.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So quick question, kind of follow up off of that. I don't have it in the notes, but obviously the last year has been touched a lot by COVID. And so maybe the way in which we neighbor changes a little bit depending on like how at risk someone is or how safe they feel or whatever. And now we're almost navigating a space. Okay, what does it look like to reacclimate a little bit now that some people are vaccinated? How have you found navigating that? Have you had to get creative of, okay, there's not so much physical contact, but we're still relational? What does that look like for you guys?
Yes, I think it's a lot to do with our mindset. When you think about it, we as Christians, there's a certain call on our life, and we're not called to be afraid. We've got Christ on our side, and he's the one who loves our neighbors more than we do. He's the one who goes before us. He's the one that we can tap into before we go into any of these situations, whether it's a meal or work or the grocery store or car line. So if we have this mindset of, God, you're going before me in this, help me not to be afraid. There's something that just we can exude in a conversation and in a gathering that's going to bring other people to peace. And I know we're seeing this out here. There's a lot of fear around us. I realize we're probably a lot more restricted too. But we can step into these circumstances and realize, wow, there's a lot of fear in this space because people are just paralyzed at times from the unknowns or what's going to happen or how do we move forward or because of what we've gotten used to in this past year. But we can be actually the people of peace that step into these conversations. And so I think just having that confidence that can only come from God, this confidence that as we step into this, greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world, right? The enemy wants everyone around us to be afraid. But we have the power of the Spirit inside of us. And as we step into these conversations, even as we're just like ordering food, maybe from a counter service, we have the ability just to say hi, hello, to look people in the eyes, to ask, how are you doing? And just even exuding that peace could, in and of itself, unlock a conversation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So I want to get really, like, just really practical here. Sure. Tips, tricks, neighboring hacks, right? Like if there was a neighboring for dummies, what are some of these things that you've had success with that over time have seen some fruit that Even in our context, it's not probably quite as urban, but things that we could still use that are probably good for people who are thinking, okay, I know I'm called to love my neighbor. I know I'm compelled to do this, and yet it still seems really awkward and hard.
Yes.
Like what are some small things I can start with that are like the first step that will give me some confidence?
Yes. Okay, so I've got a few for you, Calvary, and if you've got a pen, if you're driving, pull over. I want you to write these down or go back and listen to these. Here's a few. One, it's not what you know, it's what you notice. It's not what you know, it's what you notice. So here's what I mean by this. You might be brand new. You might be looking at this year in a whole new way. So don't stay fixated on, oh my God, I've got to know all of this. I got to know what to say. I've got to know our church service times, or I've got to know more of the Bible, or I got to know more about what I believe. Don't get fixated on what you know. Pay attention to what you notice. So if you notice someone sitting by themselves, if you notice some trash on the ground, if you notice you're at a park and a kid's hurt, or whatever, pay attention to what you notice and do something with what you notice rather than being fixated on all the things you feel like you have to know. It really is just having this mindset and this eyesight to pay attention with what you see. And it's just really important, even as you go out during the day, just say, God, show me what you want me to see. Don't beat yourself up with what you don't see. Do something with what you do see. And I promise you, if you pray that prayer, God is going to open up your eyes. I think another really simple, practical tip is to buy something extra. So this might, and take it for what it means. You might be at a restaurant, buy something extra for someone that you might see or did see as you went into the restaurant that's outside. I know we have a large homeless population. Maybe it's while you're in the grocery store or you're at the convenience store after you've pumped some gas. Buy something extra. Keep it in the car. It could be that as you're driving or you end up somewhere, there's someone that could use that food. If you've got a decent sized car, keep a cooler in your trunk and keep water bottles in there. You might end up parking somewhere and there's construction going on and you just want to bless the construction workers. So when I say buy something extra, yeah, keep something in your car, keep some water bottles in the cooler in your car, keep water bottles stocked in the fridge. So when the mail person or the Amazon delivery person are dropping off a package, give them some water. We're headed into summer. Flowers always work. Just keeping some flowers and saying, hey, this trip to the grocery store, I'm going to get some flowers and I'm not going to go inside the house until I take them to a neighbor. Buying something extra. Taking a pause because my phone went to my computer went to do not disturb.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay. All right. Another hack is do life close to church and do life close to home. And here's why. You don't want to invite someone that's 30 minutes away from your church because you're all the way on the other side of town to come to church with you. Instead, if you do life close to home and you do life close to church, it makes them easier. They can give an easier yes to saying, of course I'll be at church. It's just 5 minutes from my house. Or I would love to come over. You're just 10 minutes from where I live. So again, just keeping that, and that takes practice. You just have to add this into your life, but do life as close to home and church as you can. Another thing, and this is big for me, is to learn from the should-haves, right? I should have had them over before they moved. Or, you know what? I should have had that conversation while we were out at the game. Or I should have done that. What was I thinking? And we can beat ourselves up with all the should-haves. Instead, let's learn from it. And this comes from just conversation, right? Even the conversation you and Chris, you and I are having. It's like, okay, when I'm having a conversation with you and I'm telling you maybe something I did in my day, catch me if you hear me say, I should have done that. And let's learn from that. And by learning from it, it allows us to do it differently the next time we enter into that situation. So for instance, we're all into baseball here as a family in San Francisco. So I might have said I should have had that conversation with the guy who's battling cancer that's a dad on our baseball team. Well, when I see him tomorrow at the game, I turn that should have into a I get to. So tomorrow night when I'm at the game, I'm going to look for an opportunity just to say, hey, how are you? How are the treatments going? How are you feeling? So let's take those should-haves and let's learn from them. And then I'll give you one more. And this is to make a monthly date with a neighbor or with your community. So go ahead and get a date down. One thing that I preach is the 22nd of the month. On the 22nd of the month, and there's a story behind why it's the 22nd, but taking a date like the 22nd of the month, just say monthly date with neighbor, monthly date with the city. And by monthly date with the city, I mean, go eat local as a family. Go support that small business that needs a little boost. Plan on blessing a neighbor that day. Okay, so this doesn't have to be something that you're doing all the time. But if it becomes a habit, habits form some beautiful relationships. So just get a date down on the calendar and say, hey, on the 22nd of every month, we're going to do something to bless a neighbor and to bless our city.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. All those are really great. Thank you so much for that. And they're so achievable, right? Like, I think sometimes when we think about neighboring, it's like, oh man, I should have already had the deepest friendship ever with my neighbor. I've lived here a couple of years. Or maybe there's even regret of like, I've lived here 5-10 years. I don't have good relationships with my neighbor, but it's okay. The little things, like, they'll add up over time.
Exactly.
Like, you know, whoever spends the most time wins. Just like spend some time. It will pay off eventually. There's one story, a powerful story I love from your book, where you actually find yourself more at the baseball field than you do at church on Sundays for a season. And it just got me thinking, okay, maybe a lot of these interactions actually aren't at a church service. They're not at our building. They're not on our property. Like, these are out in the community. How do you navigate, like, church, you know, invites to church are great, but maybe it's not the first invite, or maybe it is. I don't know. How do you navigate, like, knowing where the holy ground is outside of church, but also eventually getting to a place of hey, I'm a Christian. I do attend this church. It's local. You should come with me sometime.
No, this is a great question. And Chris, I think this says a lot about your leadership that you're even asking the question. So a little part of who I am is I'm a pastor's wife. And I grew up very much in the Bible Belt. And so it's just ingrained in me that you're at church on Sunday. So this has been definitely a shift in my theology to think that, wait a second, I can live for Jesus when I'm not inside the church building, that, you know, he goes with me wherever I go. And I tell you what, maybe today you just need permission. You just need permission to be a Christian, to be a Christ follower outside of church. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it is. Like, we're not called to this just on Sundays or just at the times we're at church or just when we're thinking about it. Our call, first and foremost, is to be a follower of Jesus. And I love so much in Scripture that you see Jesus outside of the walls of the temple than you do inside the walls of the temple. So that in and of itself should give all of us permission to live our lives and to be, just to be love and kindness to everyone that we're around. And I think it's St. Francis of Assisi that says, preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. And you're right. I mean, there's a whole chapter I call the sacred field, because I kind of awoken to this reality that, wait a second, there are people that I'm going to see on the baseball field that are never going to step foot in church if it's not somebody that kind of is that bridge. Yeah. And oh my goodness, so much has shifted in my life out here where I have more unchurched non-Christians that are friends of mine than I do even within the church. Yeah. And so what I've seen form in my life is that, okay, and I'm not trying to segregate it. It's just, it's me, but these are two different places. So I've got my friends at church, love them. We can talk a certain language because we understand who Jesus is and what he's done, and we're on that spiritual journey together. But then I've got all these other places that I do life with most of the week. And I'm just learning how to have conversations with them. I'm learning what they love. I'm engaged in, they're teaching me so many things about skateboarding. I mean, I had a conversation about skateboarding the other day. I'm just learning so much.
Yeah.
But as I'm learning from them, there's a trust that's built. And again, longevity. Over the years, we've had friends that are little league players and that are, we've had soccer moms and all kinds of people that, you know, every now and then someone will actually say, what do we do? Where are we at? Why did we miss that game on Sunday? Why did I drop the kid off and then come back and pick him up? And it opens up doors for conversation. And we get to say, hey, yeah, Sunday mornings we're at church. That's where we're at. And you would probably identify well with Ben when he has to say, yeah, I actually can't coach this game, but I'll get there as soon as I can. And he makes a beeline once church is over to be at the baseball field. And God uses all of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So as we get to the near to the end of our time together, we want to ask the question, like, what's at stake? Like, why, as the people of God, should we be compelled to neighbor well? Like, what's the why behind neighboring? I mean, obviously, love God, love people, the great commandments that we have. But, it seems like neighboring is something that is, in many ways, ordinary and mundane and repetitive, and over the long haul, it's like the mustard seed neighboring. But also, like, this is a beautifully deep and holy thing. So, yeah, what's at stake for us as neighbors?
That's so good. I love completely how you described that. What's at stake is, this is, like it or not, this is how God set it up, right? This is how his plan is. Once the Holy Spirit came at Pentecost, this was his plan, to go and make disciples, to go to the ends of the earth, to go to all the neighboring communities and cities. This is his design, and he chose to use us. There is not a backup plan. We are it. And so what's at stake here is, are we going to choose to be selfish or unselfish? It really comes down to that. When I am living a selfless day, then I'm paying attention to the needs of others. And if I'm paying attention to the needs of others, God's going to help me step into an opportunity. And again, there are days, I admit it, there are days that I just miss it. And some of these opportunities catch us by surprise. And some of them, we don't even realize, wait a second, I actually did that today. I actually neighbored well today. Maybe you're just in the habit of cutting a neighbor's lawn, or checking on their mail, or babysitting for a friend. You might already be doing this well and don't even realize it. But it really comes down to selfishness and unselfishness. Loving your neighbor is putting others before yourself. And this is how God has set it up. So we either step into it and receive such great joy and get to be a part of his mission here on earth, or we let fear and other things get in the way, and we end up just being a lot more self-focused than we need to be. So there's a lot at stake. But I promise you, let's learn from our mistakes. I'm in the process of doing that too. And it's practice. It really is practice. We know Scripture is full of people who made mistakes. And I'm living them well here in the city. And God can work through our mistakes. He can work through us when we just stumbled over our words, or even if we said it incorrectly and we need to go back and fix it. The goal here, what's at stake here, is we just need to go and try. Go and attempt it. Go and take risk. And I promise you, I've got stories to prove that he is faithful and he can work through any of our messes. And a lot of the conversations can get messy, but he can work through it all.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate a lot of your sentiment of, like, as we neighbor, we're learning the should-haves and the would-haves and for those of us who maybe are feeling convicted in a new and fresh way, like, oh, maybe I haven't neighbored the best, like, that doesn't put us necessarily in a place of despair. Like, tomorrow we can make the choice to neighbor well and to see and to listen. Okay, before we go, is there anything at all else, just like anything on the table that you wanted to mention for our time here together?
You know what? Here's what I would say. I know we just said a whole lot in a short amount of time, and it might feel like the water hose is on high speed. Here's what I would say, do. Go for a walk. I'm guessing maybe even the weather's beautiful today. Maybe you do it in the morning, maybe you do it at night. Just get out and go for a walk. And as you walk, just say, God, open my eyes. Show me what you want to see. Just start there. And then see what he shows you and do something with that. But for now, yeah, as a neighbor, maybe the most neighboring thing you can do is just go for a walk in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Well, hey, Shauna, we're so grateful that you dedicated your time to be here with us today, thousands of miles away. And I'm really excited to get this out to our people, to equip them, to encourage them, to inspire them. And I'm especially just super crazy excited for May 21st, 22nd, 23rd, where you're going to be at our St. Charles campus leading us in the Live Sent weekend. And I'm counting down the days for that. So once again, just thank you so much. We appreciate it. And yeah, have a great day in San Francisco.
Awesome. See you guys very soon.